friends. Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts.
I don't think he's wasting anything on anybody. When you walk through something, it is definitely something that he can use, whether it be exciting and wonderful, or it's something that was hard. Because then you can be the testimony that can help somebody else walk that hard way that they may have. So I don't think he wastes things in our life. That's not his intent ever.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of the podcast. I'm so excited to be back with you in 2022. We are officially well into the new year. It's almost the end of January. And my hope is that you have been able to kind of refresh over the holiday season and come into this new year with renewed hope and fresh vision. One thing I love about that shift into a new calendar year is just being able to take a little bit of time and reflect on the previous year and also to look forward to what is coming. And whether you maybe set goals or resolutions or maybe have a word of the year or just have sort of like intentions going into the coming months, it seems like a really great time and season to sort of take stock and to learn more about ourselves and to find healing. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest on the show today, Darlene Caldwell. You may notice that we share the same last name, and that's because she is my mother-in-law, and she happens to actually be a prayer counselor and a prayer minister trained in a form of inner healing ministry through Elijah House. Elijah House's mission is to be an inner healing ministry that equips and empowers individual hearts to be healed and changed, truly, fully, and completely. I love that so much, and you'll hear more from Darlene about her journey in being trained in the Elijah House Ministries and what an impact inner healing has made in her life. As you'll hear her say in our conversation, there are so many different ministries out there. This is just one that she has experience in to be able to speak from. Some of the topics that we cover today in our conversation are healing from trauma, which can't we all use right now, finding forgiveness and praying for forgiveness. We also dive into how judgments and bitter root expectations can harm our relationships. We don't stop there. We get into things like lies that we may believe and also inner vows that we make that we sometimes don't even say out loud, but that are affecting our day-to-day lives. As you can tell, we talk about quite a lot today, and it is a little bit of a longer conversation, but I think you're going to love this just as much as I did. Just to share a little bit about Darlene's background, she completed the Elijah House training with the intention of finding healing herself, and through that, she ended up becoming a facilitator for the Elijah House School of Prayer Ministry. She was part of Refreshing Spring Ministries as a prayer minister for 2 years, and currently, Darlene is a prayer minister with Heart Revival Ministries. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode, where I have links to Darlene reading sample prayers for some of these different topics that we talk about today. I'll give a little bit more detail at the end of the show, but just wanted to give you a heads up to definitely check out the show notes this week at creativeimpactpodcast.com. My hope is that through this conversation, each of us will be encouraged and be able to take steps towards deeper and deeper healing in our lives. Enjoy my conversation with Darlene Caldwell. I'm so excited to be here with I like to call you mother-in-law versus mother-in-law, but mother-in-law, Darlene Caldwell. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really, I don't know if I want to say I'm glad to be here. I'm honored to be here because I'm kind of nervous. So.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think most everyone is nervous when they come on the show, so you're in good company with that. Definitely super honored and grateful to have you. I guess that talks about how we're connected already. So
I'm Ben's mom.
Yes.
All his growing up, I was known as Ben's mom.
Oh, really? So, that's awesome. And I don't think I really met you. It's possible I met you at Belhaven, but I think the first time I remember meeting you was after I had started dating Ben.
Ben's mom, right.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Same thing.
So true. But it's been a really fun past, I guess, about 8 years now since we
Wow,
met.
it's been that long.
Yeah. It's crazy. Time flies. But anyway, it's going to be fun today. So I would love for you to get to share just a little bit about your background, and especially in particular, your background with counseling, prayer counseling, and inner healing work, because that's kind of the main thing that we're going to dive into today. So do you want to just share a little bit about your background?
Yes, the first time I took an Elijah House class, which is our basis. There's other classes out there that do similar work, but the one that I started out with in probably about 2009, 2010, something like that, was Elijah House. And back then it was called Basic 1 and 2. And it's a 25-week class, the first one. And then the next one, I think, is 24. So it's a real commitment. It's like a school year. We took classes once a week, and then we would break out. We would hear the lesson, and then we would break out into small groups. So it was very enlightening. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, because it was just so much. And every week I kept thinking, I'll be good this week. This week it won't affect me so much, but that's not true. Really, sometimes there's some fallout from taking the first time. So sometimes it's really helpful if you've got mentors and facilitators who can help you through it, because sometimes you're getting hit in the face with a whole lot of stuff about yourself, places that you might not want to go normally by yourself.
Right.
And it can be a lot. It just depends. And that's the way it felt. It felt like a lot. But I took it, and the reason I took it is because I wanted to be healed myself. It was for me. And I was thought it's for me and my family. Because if I get healed as a mom, I have 4 kids and a husband, everybody benefits.
Right.
So that was my reason for doing it. And at first I didn't do it. I knew about it earlier, but my kids were small. It was just like, how do I do this with 4 small children? It's just,
right. Feels like a lot.
Homework. Yeah, it felt like a lot. So I didn't do it, even though I did know about it, because it was a lady in our church, and our pastors at that time, they had taken it, so they knew about it, and they were encouraging it. So it came through their preaching too.
Yeah, getting bits of it.
So then later, I don't know when it was, I took it again. By then they had changed the books, and now they called it School of Ministry, training course 201 and 202. And I took it because the book had changed. And I thought, well, it's been a long time. I'm going to go back to it again. So I did, again, with no real reason to say that I'm going to do this.
Right.
But it ended up that after taking it, I ended up stepping in to substitute for someone else.
Okay.
So that's how I started being facilitator myself. I think we needed somebody, and I had done it, before, and I did it, again. So I'd taken it a couple of times. So now I've taken it many times because I've been a facilitator, and every time you're a facilitator, you're taking it again.
Right. Getting all that information over again.
All the information.
Yeah.
So now, and I've also now been a mentor. That's something that our group has started to have, a mentor in the small groups to help the small group people so that they kind of stay on track.
That's smart. That's really, really cool. So
I've been mentors, I've been facilitators, and now I prayer minister. Yeah. But that was not my intent when I started. My intent was, I thought, I'm never going to teach this, but I need to be healed myself. So, but it kind of morphed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it tends to happen that way. I feel like in life, where we kind of feel like we're going one direction, then all of a sudden we end up in something else. But God, I guess, knew what he was doing, having you, going through the classes and even hearing about it beforehand, and kind of creating that interest maybe in that sort of work and getting to help other people. So that's cool that it developed over time. I love that. So then you did, through that, like some prayer counseling and that kind of thing as well.
I was actually, my first facilitator, she started kind of like a center, where we would actually do that. And so I was working there, and we worked doing that for, I don't know if it was 2 years, or was it 2.5, or was it 1.5? I don't know. But anyway, so I worked there for a while. And that was very interesting because people would come in and make appointments, and either I was a prayer minister or I would be the person who sits in and prays, and which is also cool because then when you're praying for the person, the prayer minister, and the person that's being prayed for, you get things sometimes. And so then you can, it depends on the counselor, but she always encouraged me to speak up whatever I heard in my praying. And that's always really encouraging too, because it's just encouraging to see how people, receive it and the good fruit that comes from it. But then sometimes, it's a big struggle too. So sometimes things don't happen one week. I guess it's sort of like a counselor where you might take more than one time to get to where you want to be. But,
yeah, that makes sense.
But it was very interesting, and also we taught the classes there. We taught classes and we ministered out as a prayer counselor. So that was really cool. Yeah. And then they closed the center, and now she just sort of does it from her home. And we're still all affiliated, and we still work together.
Yeah.
And now she's actually trying to start an association, International Association for Prayer Ministers.
That would be so neat. Yeah.
That's kind of the support for people who do that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how it changes people's lives.
For sure. And I'm excited to get to share some of the different elements, I guess, of the training and some of the things that you've really gone deep in with. And we're just to give a little disclaimer to everybody that's listening, we're going to really just scratch the surface of these different topics today. But at the end, we'll give some resources where you can dive into it more and, read books about it or reach out to different organizations that are doing this inner healing work. So I know it's gonna be hard because we're gonna want to keep going on all the things, but we'll try to give a kind of a brief overview of some different topics so that people, as you're listening, you can latch on to what resonates with you, and where you want to keep digging. So yeah. So just to start off, I feel like this last year and a half, especially, but has been just kind of crazy. And there's been a lot of trauma collectively for the world. I feel like, we've been walking through the pandemic and just a lot of change. And I know you and I have talked about how hard change is for everyone. Little change can be hard in our lives, but when it's at this sort of massive scale in our country and in the world, it can be really, overwhelming and traumatizing. And then with loss, there's just been a lot that people have been processing through, specifically in the pandemic, but then obviously in our lives too. We just go through different situations that may cause trauma for us. So I guess let's start there and talk about how we can heal from trauma or walk through trauma and heal in a healthy way. What are ways to find, or maybe the way I could say it is, how can we find healing from trauma?
You're so right. When I think a lot of times we don't realize that we've had trauma, and in subsequent traumas that are very quickly, and because they may not look the same, like if we had a whole bunch of losses, then you could say yes. But, we have lost so many different things. We've lost people, and we've lost, the freedoms to do what we want to do. There's so many more rules now. And then we have so much fear that's being put on us that, we may try not to have put on us, but, they keep saying, oh, well, this is terrible. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is terrible. And I sometimes really am concerned about little children because this is all they know.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've seen, some little kids who, when they get it with a group of people, they kind of really, they don't really know what to do, because they kind of really shrink back. And I don't know if that's their personality or if that's something that's happened because we've been so isolated and they've been so isolated.
Right.
If they're like 2 years old, think about it. Yeah. So that's kind of sad. And like I said, I don't know the children, so it's kind of hard to say if it is that or not. But we all know that we've had a lot of loss, loss of being able to just go to the store or go do whatever we want to do and not worry about something. Yeah. Like I heard something yesterday, it was before Christmas, or right, maybe it was after Christmas. It was it was on the news and they were talking about wonderful, they thought they were talking about wonderful things. And the wonderful thing was they were showing these reunions of people who haven't seen each other in like maybe 15 months.
Yeah.
And how happy they were to see each other. But to me, it made me so sad because I thought, wow, I'm really blessed. I did not have that, where I was kept away from my loved ones for months on end, but some people did.
Yeah.
And I mean, I literally turned it off because it was like, I don't want to hear that. It made me thankful that I didn't have to do that, but that's a hard reality.
Yeah, for sure.
That's traumatic. And then, you don't see your grandkids, and I mean, year and a half later, you see them.
Yeah.
That's terrible. It's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we go on because we do. That's what we do. We just keep going. We keep going and we make the best of it. We keep moving on. But a lot of times, all of these are losses that we've had, and we stack them on top of one another. And sometimes it comes to a point where we just hardly can deal with them anymore. And then we realize we need some help.
Yeah.
But most of the time, we kind of just keep trudging along, not realizing we're stacking them up.
Yeah, that's so true.
So I think one of the things you can look for is in trauma, sometimes there are different things that happen to us, kind of, it says like you flashbacks, or you don't remember, or you might have a lot of negativity, a lot of worry, withdrawal, anger, shame, depression, all these kind of things can be symptoms, headaches, even in different types of physical things that happen to us can all be, they said, from trauma. They can be. I'm not saying they all are.
Right.
But they can be. And so, but it's not, we can pray to remove that trauma. And that's what's so wonderful. We just ask the Lord to come and to bring his peace and to remove the things that are hurting us, that are traumatic. And so I think that it's a really long prayer, and we can definitely put it out there for you.
Yes, we will. Well, I'll definitely link to it in the show notes.
But it can be, it also, it's not just the pain and shock of different things that happen to you, which is bad enough, but sometimes we have trauma in the womb.
Yeah.
And we don't even think about that.
Yeah, because we don't necessarily typically remember, and it's something in our super early childhood or in the womb, that we wouldn't really know it unless someone told us.
Right. And sometimes you do. Sometimes, your mom or dad will tell you, oh my goodness, that was a really difficult birth, or maybe you had to be C-sectioned, or, maybe something difficult happened during that time period, like someone died that was very important to the mom or the dad. But most of the time, it's a lot about the mom. But of course, the dad, what happens, we all know already that we hear in the womb.
Yes. Yeah, that's so cool. But also it
is cool. But think about it.
Cause issues too.
Yeah, it can. It can cause issues because, if there's a big controversy that's happening, or even like this, think about it with COVID. If you're walking around in fear all the time because I'm going to get sick, or I can't go out, or I'm afraid that I'm going to get sick, that's a fear. And the mom is living with that. And so that, there's things that affect us, or if there's a breakup of even a friendship, it doesn't even have to be a marriage. It could be, something that's very, it's a person that's affecting you emotionally, a loss, or someone dying. And then there's also generational trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like things that traumatize maybe not you, but they traumatized your mother or dad or your grandparents, and you're still walking in that. So we still have residual effects. That sounds kind of weird, but it's not.
Yeah, we tend to think of it maybe as almost just like patterns, or like, we may not use the word like a generational trauma, but I think we all can recognize those things are there, but we don't necessarily have the language to talk about it.
Right. And so, it's just like with all prayer. I mean, God doesn't leave us in this. He doesn't leave us hopeless. He never leaves us hopeless. and this just says, I'm with you and I'll just transfer it to me. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it. And that's just so beautiful that he can do that. And it works. And I've seen it work so many times. And it's just amazing. I can give a small example.
Yeah.
I have 8 grandchildren, but the oldest one, my mom has a pool in her where her house is. And he was very careful. He was, your firstborn. He's very careful. He doesn't take a lot of risks, and I don't know. It was in the winter. I know it was in the winter because it was cold. And I was sitting out there with my mom on the back patio, and he was just, he was with me, and he was just, fooling around and walking around the pool. And all of a sudden he slipped in, which is just not his MO at all.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I do is dive in, jump in the pool and pull him out. My first thought was, okay, I don't want him to be traumatized. I don't want him to be afraid of the water.
Right.
And so I started praying that I didn't go through this lengthy trauma prayer, which we have a really long one. I just prayed and asked the Lord to remove the trauma off of his body. And I did it out loud so he can hear me. And so he wasn't afraid. And I said, just remove it from him so that he doesn't store this in himself, and that you would just take it from him, and that you would give him your peace, and the Holy Spirit will fill that place, and there would be no fear. And so it was so interesting. And we did talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, Jesus, Peter walked on the water. And, we were talking about water, and he wasn't afraid. He wasn't. And he was all excited about it. He wanted to tell his mom about it. And I was thinking, oh gosh, I don't know about that. That's my daughter-in-law. She was great, but it was like, okay.
That's funny.
But he was never afraid of the water. I mean, you know him.
Yep.
He's not afraid of the water. He loves the water. It never affected him. He loves to go boating, and he loves to, do anything. And the water didn't scare him. And so, but it could have, because, there's a lot of people who've accidentally fallen in the water and thought something bad was going to happen. And, they were now traumatized. I knew a girl that I worked with years and years ago. And this was way before I knew this. And she took swimming lessons over and over and over. She was an adult. She did not want to be afraid of the water, but she had seen somebody who had drowned when she was a young girl. And that traumatized her. I wish I would have known it then. Yeah. I could have prayed for her and just removed that, because she kept persevering and trying not to be afraid of the water.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a good image that helps show the picture of what happens when we do give it over to God and we pray through those things. It's nice because it's kind of a clear picture, and it can be related to so many different things that we walk through. And there was one thing that you mentioned in there was how, you didn't want it to be sort of stored in his body. And I think that's such an interesting concept. There's like books out about it, how our bodies actually hold on to trauma and stress and things like that. You want to just touch on that briefly? I know that could be a whole nother rabbit trail, but.
Well, it can be. But one of the things in the very prayer is that we pray it off of ourselves, off the very DNA of our body. Because how many times is it that, let's take, for instance, if someone's maybe been in a car accident, or maybe they haven't, but do you know how a mom will right away throw out her arm to protect her kid or her child or whoever? Could be her husband if he's sitting next to her. But it's an automatic reflex. It's programmed in ourselves. We were afraid. We've been there before. And so then we automatically react to protect. And that is what that is. It's just programmed in our cells and our DNA and our memory, our subconscious, our unconscious. It's all of those things. It's not just our conscious, it's our unconscious, our subconscious. It's all there.
Yeah. It's pretty.
We've got these computer brains.
Pretty powerful. That's pretty awesome. So I'll definitely link to the trauma prayer, because it is just so powerful to have kind of read over you,
Right. It is.
Yeah.
It is, because you also are asking to heal what we call the fear center of your brain. Because there is, a certain area of your brain that does store it more than others.
Yeah.
So
That's so
We
good.
pray to remove that. So,
Yeah.
and to replace it with his peace.
Mm-hmm. So that would be something I think for all of us to, especially as we're going into a new year and we're kind of entering 2022 now in January, thinking about, okay, how do we want to enter this year, and being able to maybe pray through some of these things so that we're entering in a place that's more whole and, healed and less burdened by some of those things.
Right.
Yeah. And that actually leads pretty perfectly into forgiveness, because I know forgiveness is a huge part of kind of this inner healing journey. And I'm curious to hear you talk about what role it plays with our own healing. And I think there's so many thoughts and books and podcasts and all the things on forgiveness and different kind of views of what that looks like. But I think you explain it super well with, it's not like saying whatever that person did is okay or right or anything like that. But it's more like freeing yourself from holding that offense or like holding on to that person and trying to kind of bring justice yourself. But anyway, I'll turn it over to you because I feel like you'll explain it really well.
Well, you did a very good job. You did a very good job. And that's so true. I know a lot of us will think, well, I want to forgive them, but they don't deserve it. Or maybe, or whatever. You just don't feel like, you feel like somehow or another you're holding something against them, and that way you're punishing them. But the truth of the matter is, most of the time they don't ever think about it again. Mm-hmm. If you're real about it, you're the one that's thinking about it and they're not. But it is so true that it is not about that. We are following the Lord's command to forgive. And the reason we do that is to release it from us. Because as long as we're holding on to it, we have free will. If I'm going to hold the judgment on someone, then I'm the judge. He's not. I am. So if I release it, like you said, then that doesn't make them not guilty. But at the same time, there are things that I need to forgive. And that was probably judging them, because if I'm holding forgiveness, I probably judge them for, being whatever, mean. Or I want to say that, really didn't have to say that, Mm-hmm. And then I'm holding a judgment against them. Well, I need to ask for forgiveness for that, because I have now judged them. And if I let go of that judgment against them and I forgive them, then I'm releasing them to the Lord. And what is he doing with it? That's up to him.
Yeah.
So, but he can work in the other people's hearts so that maybe there'll be a change in their heart. I don't know that you'll be friends again or not. I mean, that's not the issue. But we're releasing them for God to work in them in that area. Well, as long as we hold on to it, we're really the judge and jury. And a lot of times, like I said, the other people don't even know it.
Yeah.
That's the sad thing. And you're over there steaming about something.
Right.
That is making you sick, probably.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. It's super powerful. And I think that's one of those areas where we can not realize it necessarily, but we can end up carrying so much extra weight emotionally because we're holding on to these offenses or just unforgiveness, so to be able to release those people could be like totally freeing and a weight off.
It is. Yeah. That's true. Another thing is there's another one that's called kind of bitter root expectations. That's another terminology we use along with judgments. And what that is like, well, I just expect them to do that. They always do that. They're gonna say something because they always do. And the problem is there again, we are expecting them to do it. So you know what the chances are?
They're probably going to do it, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And so we have to release them not only of our judgment, but of our expectations, our bitter expectations, because you're kind of holding them again in that place where you almost draw it out. And the stories sometimes are just unreasonable. I mean, there were people who they had maybe been married before to an alcoholic. And so the last thing they ever wanted was to be, married to someone who was an alcoholic. And so then they, got this next guy was, didn't even drink alcohol at all.
Yeah.
And, he was very godly and everything. But because of this bitter expectation that maybe all men or husbands or whatever, and the unforgiveness she held toward the other one, pretty soon that person started drinking. I mean, I've heard weird stuff like that. I mean, it's just weird, but it's kind of like that thing where we always say, well, there's a lot of things we say, well, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. Then guess what? She's doing it. So marrying somebody who's not the person she wanted.
Yeah.
Because she was expecting something that she didn't. And as parents, we really have to be careful that we don't do that for our kids. That's really hard to.
That would be hard. Yeah. not to
That's really hard.
Create an expectation.
Think about it. If you want them to walk free and to do better, then we have to encourage them and not expect them to fall in the pool again.
Yeah.
Or to whatever it is, that we would expect that maybe they weren't careful enough.
It's interesting how much our language, how powerful it can be, whether that's actually spoken out loud or in our heads.
In our head. A lot of stuff is spoken in our head.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is why we don't remember it then. And sometimes it's really good to speak with a prayer minister, just like a counselor, because they start asking you questions. It's not like we're going to give you the answers, but we have to, just like a counselor, ask you questions. You start asking you questions until you finally say something that's a key. Because that's usually what will end up happening. It doesn't always happen right away, because sometimes people, it's not in the forefront. They'll say, oh no, my dad was great, or oh no, my mom was great. And they just don't see it. And that there was something that they said to you maybe at some point. I think I told you about someone who thought their dad was great, and the counselor kept going back and knew there must have been something there. And finally the person said, oh, well, when I was in high school, he said he didn't really think that I was college material because, I'm just not very good at, I know you too well, and that's just probably not going to be where you will, that's not probably where you would do well. And the person took that. I don't know how the dad meant it. He could have meant that, that he really didn't believe that they could thrive there. But the person took it as a saying, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
I can't. He doesn't think I can do it. I'm not smart enough. So, a lot of times it's the way we receive what people say. And maybe that's not what he meant at all.
Right.
But, that was something that was holding her back, holding the person back. But yet she thought, her dad was great. But it took a little bit of digging for it to finally come out of her mouth.
Yeah. And that really is, for her, believing a lie, that whether he meant it that way or not, like you said, she took it internally and took it as truth when really it was not true. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about believing lies at this point as well. It's a good segue.
Yeah, lies. That was one of the things that really I don't think people think about as much. I mean, people talk more about forgiveness and even maybe about judging other people because, we reap what we sow. So I get that. And most people kind of know that. But then about the lies we believe, and sometimes we don't even know what they're lies that we're believing
because we believe them.
We believe them, but we don't even know where they started sometimes. And so like this person, she didn't know where it started. And then all of a sudden it just popped out. It was something that someone said. And then you take that and you're going, oh my goodness, really? Oh, okay. And so all of a sudden we've swallowed it just like bait. And now it's ours and we believe it. And then after that, we're acting out on that. Well, I don't know that I can do this, and when new things come up, you may not think you can do it. And I'm not saying that I'm not very afraid to do this, but I am a little bit. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is there's all kinds of lies that we believe. And it could be, like I said, it can be things that were said to us or things that we missed. We read into something that shouldn't have, that's not what they meant. And we just believe them. And sometimes they're just things that we've decided, I think.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. I think in your growing up years, I know in my growing up years, things weren't as easily available. I mean, now things are getting a little bit harder, but what I meant was, now I see my grandkids, they got all kinds of toys. I'm not saying that I didn't have plenty of toys because I did.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, I was more in the thing of where, well, I might want to hold on to this. This. I might need this sometime. Instead of throwing it away or giving it away to someone else, I might keep it because I might need that. And I know I got that from my mom and dad because they grew up during the Depression.
Right.
And so now there is one that's almost a generational thing. You see, they grew up during the Depression. They did not have things. They did not have money. And it was true that they did hold on to things and recycle them, use them for something else. Like flour came in sacks, and they would take those flour sacks and they would make clothes out of them. That's a perfect example of way back when.
Yeah.
Now, my clothes weren't made out of flour sacks, but my mom did make my clothes. So all I'm trying to say is I have that tendency still to not want to let things go. I want to hold on to it. And I just recently came into this thinking, and this is kind of new. And because once you're a prayer counselor and you've learned this stuff, hopefully you're using it on yourself.
Right. And that's definitely the hope. Yeah.
My most recent one was like, okay, we're coming into a different season of life here for us. And, we're going to start walking in retirement. And that's a big change. And change isn't always easy for me. And some people love it. But the change doesn't bother me quite as much as the fact that we were talking about moving. And so I'm thinking, okay, great. It sounds good. And it sounds good to sound exciting, right?
Yeah.
But then to do that, you have to let go of what you have to move to something new. And I realized that was the key right there. It was letting go of what is to have something else.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people struggle with that, but I realized that, I'm thinking, okay, and if I pray, I should be praying in faith, believing for. Otherwise, it's not a faith-building prayer. So if I can't pray in faith, believing that God's going to give me something new and willingly let go of the old, then there's a conflict.
Yeah. And maybe a block in a way.
Right. From receiving something new. Because it's not like, again, I'm not praying in a believing faith building, saying, I believe that he's got something, a new thing for me, a new home, maybe a new place.
Yeah.
And that, I know for some people that's not a hard thing, but for those of us who, are walking with my mom and dad's beliefs, then I'm bringing that forward. And, they lived, I think as far as long as I knew them, they lived in 2 houses. One and then one other one.
Yeah, that's true.
and so it's like, okay, settled. this would be like house 3 for me. Oh wow, that's out of the box.
Yeah. A lot.
So I mean, some people that's no big deal because they just moved all the time, and so they're okay with it because as kids they moved all the time. But that's not the way it was for me. I'm just giving you that as an example.
It's a good example
because there's a lot of things that we believe and don't know we believe them.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was what was holding me back. But yet I realized that my prayers were not in the faith realm that builds faith. They were kind of like, Lord, if you want to, if it's your will. I didn't want to do that. I want to be able to pray, Lord, this is your will. This is what you want for me. And I'm going to believe for it.
Yeah. That's so good.
It's a different prayer.
Uh-huh.
So I'm still working.
Yeah.
I'm still a work in progress.
We definitely all are, for sure. And I could even see how it would flip, just as an example for someone who has moved around a lot, that they may be kind of believing lies about what staying in one place for a long time would mean, just interesting how all of our, like you said, our family history and then also experiences that we've had can kind of shape these thoughts. And so it's really good to kind of take a step back and hopefully either on your own, which you totally do and pray through, but it helps to have that person to talk through it with,
It's true.
And to ask you questions, but to be able to reflect and actually examine some of those thoughts and beliefs that we just kind of have been operating under and we don't realize. Kind of bring it into the light a little bit and be like, is this actually in line with God's word? Is it actually serving my, my life?
Right. Is it truly me? Yeah. Is it truly my identity? Is it truly what God has for me? Or is it really holding me back?
That's really good.
I mean, that's a big deal. And I think, I know that has helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Because you think you're one way. And then when you start praying this stuff off of you, you realize you're not that at all. You're somebody else. You've got different gifts and talents. And God gives all of us gifts and talents. And we don't utilize them because we have beliefs that I can't do that.
And I could see how, thinking about kind of spiritual battle that is going on all the time, right? So that the enemy could very easily be using this kind of thing in our lives pretty constantly to try to keep us from really operating in our gifts and the things that we're, designed to do or to, pursue or whatever, and kind of holding us back based on these things that we're believing, or in being in unforgiveness or whatever, like some things that are just blocking us from fully walking in our calling, or in our gifts.
Yes. I mean, of course, why not? I mean, God says in the Bible, devil is father of lies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, guess what? Yes, that's his number one thing, is to get us to believe a lie.
Yeah. And we tend to think, especially if you've grown up in the church, like lies are like, I don't know. So the big lies, or like some sort of intentional, act of telling someone something that's not true and whatever. It's like this big deal.
Right. Like
and
fibs.
It is.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you're fibbing.
Exactly.
You say it as a kid. Or you're tattling, or you're, whatever. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, things that are holding you back, like rejection. You think, well, nobody likes me.
Yeah.
I mean, if you believe that, then you're really, or they don't want to hear some is speaking, like when you were raised, maybe you were supposed to be seen and not heard. I don't know that that's this generation, but the other one, back in my day, that was very common. And most people that we will go through this with will all say that. They'll say, oh, yes, as children, we were seen and not heard. And so we were not to be speaking. So what does that tell a kid? I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Right. My thoughts don't matter, or my voice doesn't matter.
Right. Mm-hmm. I don't matter. You can go anywhere. It depends on what the person, how they receive it. The same thing can happen to the same kid, like in a family, and each one will receive it a different way.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's still a lie, that they weren't supposed to be speaking, or they didn't, maybe no one wanted to hear them. And then, what's really common, this one's kind of weird, but it's not really, if you think about it. Sometimes people who talk a lot, they just have to talk incessantly. It was because they were never heard as a kid. And so they're trying to make up for it. So sometimes it's lies, and sometimes it's just things that happen. But the lies are a big, big deal. And if we can renounce those lies and give the Lord the opportunity to show us the truth, it can change your life. Yeah. I've seen people totally change. Like I said, they thought they were one way, and then they found out that wasn't the way they were at all. That wasn't them. Not really.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. And I think you touched on inner vows some kind of as we went. Is there anything else you wanted to share on that?
Yeah, vows. Oh my goodness, vows. That's when we say, I will never do that again. Or you think it. Or you might think, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna speak anymore because people they don't want to hear me anyway. So I'm not gonna talk. That's a vow. And sometimes, a lot of times, we don't say them. So those are the real tricky ones because we don't say them out loud. So for us to remember them sometimes is a real, it's not easy. That's when sometimes, again, speaking it out helps a lot because, you're thinking, well, I don't remember ever saying that.
Right.
Well, you might not have, but you thought it.
Yeah.
Like a child in class. Let's say somebody was in class and they got called on, or they would always get the wrong answer. Well, then, they're not going to volunteer. They're not going to volunteer, and they're not going to volunteer to do things because, they were always shut down. They always felt like, well, I was wrong, whatever I said. So whatever I say, I'm wrong. So I'm not going to say anything. And so then they say that to themselves. I'm not going to say anything. And these vows are, like, oh, there's always the one, like, I'm not going to, you've been jilted by some guy. Well, then you're going to say, I don't trust men, and women and men can say the same thing.
Yeah.
So, anything that it can be just a circumstance. And you'll just say that, well, I'm not going to trust people. So
wow.
Those are vows that we've taken, and they hold us back. They also hold us back from all that we're supposed to be, all God has for us. You've probably heard that scenario, where, they go to heaven and then they see all these boxes and they said, oh, all of these gifts were yours, but you didn't ever give them. You didn't ever claim them. So, he's got lots of gifts for us. He's a good God. But sometimes we hold ourselves back. Not just sometimes, probably most of the time.
Yeah.
and it's not always, sin is somehow the original thing, but, we turn it into false beliefs, lies, vows we make. And those are the things I think most of the time are hidden from us. We don't think about those. We just move on in our life.
Yeah.
We don't think about them.
We don't typically take the time to really think through those things and talk through those things. So that's why I think it could be so powerful. And that made me think too, that a lot of times the lies that we believe can be about God too.
We do. Like maybe if you were a child and you prayed for something to happen, maybe for your mom not to die, if she was sick, or your dog ran away and you never came back, or you believed that maybe, I remember as a kid, one of the things I believed is my dog ran away. And I thought that he ran away and God let that happen because I was bad. I had done something bad. I mean, that's really not it at all.
No.
The dog ran away.
Right.
As a kid,
it feels very real.
Sometimes I'm thinking we're laying a little bit too much responsibility on God. That was like, the dog ran away. He did come back, but he just took and jumped around the neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah.
So, because he was a guy. So, he just wanted to stretch his legs. So I don't know, sometimes I think, and that's another thing with forgiveness. One of the things people need to think about is that they need to forgive God.
No, that's
and they don't like to admit that, because that just sounds like, oh man, that's terrible if I have to forgive God. But isn't that true? I mean, sometimes you can be unhappy with, your family and think, why did you put me in this family, God? It's hard. It's hard living in this family. And so I think a lot of times we do need to forgive God. If we are really to turn it over to him and say, and sometimes we can't. You just have to say, Lord, can you help me forgive? We have to do that too, because there's those times that you're just going, I don't know if I can do it. This was really, really bad. And so it's not easy to forgive. And so there was many a time when I just said, Lord, you're going to have to help me to forgive.
Yeah.
You're going to have to work it in my heart. And I'll start with saying, I want to.
Yeah. Just think.
And eventually,
I want to forgive.
I want to forgive and help it to make it real in my heart. And eventually he will. And it will be a real forgiveness, a heartfelt forgiveness, so that when you think about that incident again, it's nothing. It doesn't ping you anywhere. It doesn't hurt. And I think that's a heartfelt forgiveness. And sometimes that takes a little time. There's a lot of things that have been very, that we walk through that is very hurtful. And I think that's when you get to that place, then it's done. So, but, don't let it stop you from starting.
Yeah.
You might not feel that way right away, but, you start.
It's a process.
We don't understand.
That's really, really good. Yeah, that helps kind of give just a bit of an overview of some of these really powerful elements of inner healing and areas to focus in on, because it's like, it's all connected, honestly, but there's so many different areas to kind of dissect and get more information and talk through and all of that. But I love kind of at least, getting to talk through some of the basics of it. Do you have any tips for practical steps for people who are wanting to kind of pursue walking through some of these things and processing through and finding more healing in the coming days.
Of course, I only know what I know. Like I said, I know there's many other ministries that do it, because I've heard of different ones, and they do it different ways.
Yeah.
But they're all, similar also. I belong to a ministry that's called Heart Revival Ministry. And that's the prayer ministry. We have our originator, she wrote a 6 or 8 weeks course. I think I told you that. It's called Passion for Purpose, I believe. They have a 6-week part, and you can start with just doing 6 weeks. And so it kind of touches a little bit on everything, and it's very helpful. And then if that perks your interest and you think, oh, I really want to do the big one, then we use Elijah House, and that is a 25-week course.
Okay.
The first year, and then the second year, it's a 24-week course. And when you get done with that, you could be a prayer minister,
Yeah.
or you can just take it for yourself, like I did the first time through.
Right.
I just took it for myself and I used it. And I had no intention of doing more. So nothing's expected, but it does change your life. I know there's a pastor, she took it, and with some of her people that were in ministry in her church. And she was so excited about it. She saw how this could change people's lives. And she then, they talked about it. And then more people talked about it, and more people took it in her church. And, her goal was to get as many people as she could in her church to go through this healing process, because, it lets go of a lot of hurts, so people can really be all that the Lord has for them to be. They can walk in their giftings. And I think it's really sad that a lot of times, we don't even know what our gifting is,
right,
let alone walk in it. So, and I know that sometimes our hurts keep us from understanding our own gifting, because we don't see it, that we have that gifting, because we've got these lies and beliefs that we have and vows we've made that it doesn't, so we don't look like that. We may not look like we have the prophetic, or we may not look like we are an encourager, or we may not look like we are a teacher, because of some of our own hurts and lies we've believed. That was kind of funny. I didn't really think I was a teacher. and I'm pretty gifted in teaching, but I didn't know it at first. And I remember that saying to someone, oh, I just don't think I have the patience for that. Now, what is patience? I did not think I did, because of a lot of things that had happened to me and a lot of the lies I believed. But, God has he can work patience.
Right. He can help develop patience.
He can help develop patience. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so yes,
that's
I did
awesome.
teach a long time. So
that's great.
Before teaching this, I homeschooled my kids. So.
Right. So you did quite a bit of teaching.
I did a lot of teaching.
That is
and
so
before
funny.
that, I taught vacation Bible school.
Oh, yeah.
So,
that's
like
cool.
That. So, we never know what the Lord has in store for us. And I always say that nothing's wasted. I don't think he's wasted anything on anybody. When you walk through something, it is definitely something that he can use, whether it be exciting and wonderful, or it's something that was hard. Because then you can be the testimony that can help somebody else walk that hard way that they may have. So I don't think he wastes things in our life. That's not his intent ever.
That's so good.
So.
Yeah. So good. Any specific book recommendations that you have?
For me, my latest thing for me is that I have learned that I had some giftings that I didn't actually recognize. Again, that's why I keep telling you all that over and over. I was, some people call it highly sensitive people, and some people call it burden bearing. Those are, I guess they're sort of church terms. You've heard of burden bearers, maybe, and maybe you've never heard of it. But it's people who are highly sensitive, and they pick up, they're very feeling, and they pick up other people's burdens. And then when you start doing that, after a while, you've got a whole bunch of burdens. You are carrying a sack full of burdens because everybody in your life's got burdens. And then you're trying to fix everybody and make everybody happy. And that's really not your job, but you think it's your job. So you do that. And most of the time you're doing it because you really want to feel better. You think if that person feels better and if I can help them feel better, then I'll feel better.
Yeah.
Because I'm feeling it,
Yeah.
So if you don't feel hurt, then I won't feel hurt. That's a burden bearer. And so I started with that, I guess last year was it? Or the year before. And I started reading books on burden bearing and highly sensitive people. And then I realized that was taking me into the prophetic. And that's actually some of the, we think of a prophet like in the Old Testament, but it's people who have different tendencies. And so if you do, I would recommend everybody do some kind of study on spiritual gifts.
Yeah, that's good.
How about if I go there? Because what I'm trying to tell you is difficult if you don't know spiritual gifts. But if you know the spiritual gifts, it's not difficult. But anyway, basically what I'm trying to say is I didn't realize that one of my spiritual gifts was prophecy. And so now I'm reading books on the prophetic. And it's so eye-opening. Just like if you just start with your spiritual gifts, you start reading that and you're going, oh, that's me. Oh, I do that. Oh, yeah, I do that. I feel like that. And it's kind of validating. Yeah. Don't you think it is?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I think that's one reason I liked things with like the Enneagram or different like personality profiles. And a lot of people do that kind of stuff because you feel validated. You're like, oh yeah, that I'm not the only one. Like that totally makes sense.
You're not the only one.
And I think that's the same kind of feeling that you get when you realize, oh, this does line up with this being a spiritual gift of mine, or these are sort of characteristics of that gifting. So yeah, I think it's really encouraging in a way.
I think it's really encouraging, but sometimes I'll still go back to it. I've seen people with a lot of lives, vows, and unforgiveness, and their spiritual gifts were misanalyzed because of it. So that can happen. I'm not going to say that you can go out and take a spiritual gifts test and it'll be totally correct.
Right.
But it might.
Yeah.
So, but I guess that's where I'm coming from is I'm learning more even about myself. I kind of knew about the teaching because obviously I've taught for years. So I pretty much thought I was a teacher.
Yeah.
But then I started some more research in these different books. And I was like, oh my, no wonder I feel like that. No wonder I want to do this. No wonder I feel called to this. And yet at the same time, I felt odd. I didn't feel like I fit. So it's very nice to know that you do fit somewhere.
For sure. Yeah.
Kind of like the ugly duckling. I think that story means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Because I felt like all my life that I thought other people thought like me, but they don't, and I didn't understand that. But the ugly duckling, he just was he didn't understand who he was, that he was a swan. Yeah. He kept trying to be a duck. And so, that's like it with our spiritual gifts. And I kept thinking, well, I'm just a teacher. I'm a teacher. And then I realized that it was more than that, it's in the prophetic realm. And that was not something I was taught about much in growing up. Right. I was in the church all my life, but that was not in your regular fundamental church. That those were not, your Bible church it was more charismatic. And I started hearing it more and more about it, I guess, but I never really put myself in that spot because I just didn't think. I guess I just never thought about myself as being there.
Yeah.
So I just thought, well, that's really important people that do that. Somebody who's really special does that. And I just didn't think that of myself. Again, there was a lie. I didn't think that. That was something. And so I never really researched it any. And when I started researching it, I realized that there was something there that I never really validated in myself.
Yeah.
So I think all of these things are very special in the fact that it gives you an identity. Once you start peeling off the things that really aren't you, you can start finding out who you really are.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a gift. I think it's such a gift. Not only is it a gift to the body of Christ, it's a gift to yourself. It's a gift to your family because we are all special.
Designed for a purpose, for sure.
And designed for a purpose.
Yeah.
That's right.
With spiritual gifts, is there a book that kind of dives into them that you would recommend?
The easiest book I know is the one I gave you.
Sounds good. I can link to it in the show notes. I'll have to.
You can put a link to it.
Yes, perfect.
I'm sure there are a lot of spiritual gift tests out there on the internet. I know you can do them. And there are a lot of people that have written stuff on that. I just am not, I've never done a study like that, especially I've done a study in general, but like a specific book. Yeah. Like I said, the book that I gave you that Sherry Torber wrote is it's a real small,
but it's a small, easy read. Yeah, you could really sit and read it.
It's a good place to start. Mm-hmm. I would call it a great starter book.
Yeah.
What was interesting, I thought in there is it said like, well, you answer all the questions. You think, oh, that's me. Oh, that's not me. And so then when you kind of tone it down to one or the other, there's a spiritual. Then it starts saying, well, wonder if you're married to this. This person is this and you are this. And how does that work being married? I mean, that is also something that's very important, because if we know our spiritual gifts as a couple, we can enhance each other's and we can move forward in the kingdom as a power couple. Let's call it that. At least we're using both of our gifts instead of working against one another with our gifts or feeling, well, this person's very spiritual and I'm not.
Yeah.
Then you're not working in tandem. So, which gives you more power. I mean, we all know the verse, about the three chords, and so with God and two people, and we're much stronger. So that's another thing I would have to say that I guess in the past, well, it was before COVID, my husband actually took the Elijah House class. I mean, he knew about it too, because, we've been talking lingo forever and, with the church and everything. And he finally actually took the 2-year class, and it was eye-opening to him. He remembered things too. Things came up that he had forgotten, when he was younger, and how they've affected him all his life. And that's really the key. And so he realized that he had gifts too that he wasn't utilizing.
Yeah.
And so now it was so interesting. It's not only can we talk the same talk, he has a better understanding somehow of me. And it's like, he says, I just never really understood you. But now I understand you. And I understand, this is the way you are. And so I think that's cool. And I can understand. And we've been able to really connect better, I guess I would like to say, and utilize each other's gifts and walk. So we're accentuating not each other's gifts and as a team, kind of like a team of oxen. Yeah. You can have one ox or you can have two ox. And when you put the two oxen together, yoked together, they can pull a lot more than one.
Right.
And if you've got two that are yoked together and they're not pulling together, you've got a mess.
Yeah.
So
that's so good.
It's really good when you actually know each other's giftings and you can use them for the kingdom, not against each other, mind you, but that you can use them to further the kingdom.
Yeah, that's so good.
Walk in tandem.
So cool. Yeah, it's been cool being sort of an observer to that journey for you guys too. And it's been really, really beautiful to watch. And I think for Ben and I too, over the years, we've grown and learned a lot about each other, and we'll continue to, I'm sure, but it definitely helps to kind of open our eyes to, oh, that's why you like this, or that's okay. That makes sense. You're not crazy.
Like that. Or why do you think like that? Exactly. I don't think like that.
Yes. So
that's definitely true.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about just how inner healing has impacted your life? I know we've kind of touched on it throughout.
Well, I would say I would still go back to the thing of discovering more about myself and my identity in Christ. And like I told you, it was a big plus for my marriage.
Yes.
We both went through it, and I knew and bless his heart, here I'm walking through all this stuff, and I would help him along the way if I could, but he was everybody is like this. It's kind of like, we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
These are places we got hurt. Do I really want to go back and think about that?
Not really.
Not really. I think I'd just rather just forget about it and move on. But the problem is, it's not really forgotten. It's affecting our lives, and we don't even realize it's affecting our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So
we like to
I could never
pretend
say,
like we can ignore it.
yes, everything is good. Fine, I'm fine. How are you? Fine? Oh, good. I'm glad you're fine. Everybody's fine.
Uh-huh.
But no, it's work, but it's worth it. It is so worth it. And I think once someone sees that, then you see the valuable. It's valuable. It's so valuable. But I think the most fun thing is that you can be yourself and you can find out who yourself is.
I love that sort of self-discovery element for sure. And learning more about God and kind of the different, we talk about the body of Christ, but the way that he really has so beautifully designed us to all not be the exact same, because that would be boring, but to be able to work together. So
exactly. And even though I have a teaching gift, that doesn't mean I'm going to teach just like someone else.
Right.
Everybody has their motivation for their teaching.
Mm-hmm.
My motivation is I want you to be healed.
Yeah.
And so somebody else's motivation may be different.
So true. So true. Well, as you know, this podcast typically is kind of focusing in on the arts and kind of how our art and faith work together and all of that kind of stuff, and getting to share people's stories. So I really appreciate you sharing your story today, or parts of it that we got to get to. But I also am curious, I like to ask this of everyone, and I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have anything kind of just on your heart in this season that you want to share with artists out there and fellow artists, because we didn't really talk about this as much, but you have a background in dance and really lots of arts. You painted and
I know,
lots of
I
creative
do.
endeavors.
I do. And the thing that I thought was so beautiful is that I didn't realize that my gifting, the prophetic gifting, is very creative. And I just have discovered that just, not too long ago. And because I started reading books about the prophetic gifting, and I'm thinking, wow, I've even taken a class about it. And it was like, wow, this is really cool. So the reason I wanted to dance was because of that. And I didn't realize that. I just I felt like God was calling me to dance in church. I mean, and that was back in the day when that was not something people did. It's not in my church. Uh-huh. So, and, drawing and, painting, and I did that even before. But I think the one that was, the one that to me was more outside of the box, and of course, playing musical instrument, but I did that as a child. But the whole thing about the dance, that was very, I felt the unction to do that. It was, I was being called to do that. And then to go into the dance world, that was very eye-opening too. So that was very hard because, well, we all know what that's like. It's competitive and it's perfectionism, and, it can be rejection. All those things. And unfortunately, when I was doing that and doing those classes, I still had a lot of rejection, and I still had perfectionism. I wanted so hard for everything to be perfect. But, looking backwards now, I can say I was called to worship. I was not called to perform. I was not called to be the ballerina. I did perform, but I wasn't the top choice here.
Yeah.
But I know what it felt like. And so when my kids went the same route, and I didn't understand either, but they were called to it too, they experienced too. And I understood their dilemma, but at that time I wasn't really prepared to help them understand why. That they were, and I tried to say, I think you're called to worship. So, but when you're in the, that's what you're doing, you're performing, it's really hard not to get sucked into perfection. I mean, we all want to do the best for the Lord. We want to do our best. I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that comparison of, I'm chosen, you got chosen, I didn't. It's hard.
It is hard.
I remember those are very difficult moments.
Yeah.
And that just kind of, if you're coming from rejection, that just really is a cementer. So it's really hard. But, we all walked through it, but that was their calling. And I didn't realize it at the time that it was their gifting. That was their gifting. It was prophetic gifting. And I didn't realize that. I wish I would have known that. Maybe that could have helped. Maybe. So I would probably say, if you have children, try to find out what their gifting is. First, find out what yours is.
Yeah.
And learn something about spiritual gifts. Because when you learn that about yourself, and you can then start seeing it in your children, what they are, that is the whole deal about calling them forth. We want to bless them. We want to bless our kids and call them forth to what God has for them. Are they an evangelist? Are they creative? Are they prophetic? Or are they, maybe they're teachers, or maybe they're encouragers? Encourage them in that. And instead of, sometimes we say the wrong thing, and it's not encouraging as parents. And sometimes it just slips out. But anyway, I think in the long haul, it would help tremendously for all of us if we would know that, and we would bring up our children that way.
Yeah.
Of knowing what their gifts are.
So helpful.
I see that now. I'm starting to see that in my grandkids, and it's so interesting. I could go on for hours about my grandkids and their giftings, and how it's just kind of fun to see it.
For sure. It's fun to sort of discover it over time.
So, but I would say that I think that it's very enlightening and helpful.
Well, this has been awesome. I love getting to learn more about it, and I'm super excited to get to share this with people, and hopefully get other people excited about it too, and then they'll want to learn more.
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, I think.
Yeah,
Heart Revival Ministries has a Facebook page.
Okay, cool.
So there might be some things on there too.
And then what's the website? And
the website is Heart Revival Ministries, one word, and it's ministries, plural.com.
Awesome.
So there are probably classes or even testimonies. Sometimes people just post testimonies. So there's just different things on there.
That's perfect.
It's a way to start, or like I said, you can look, there are other ministries out there I know too, but that do similar things.
That's awesome. It's a great starting place. One fun question that I like to ask everybody, semi-unrelated, but who knows, could be, is what is one of your favorite things right now?
Probably one of my favorite things has been, I really, really love to get together with my grandkids and see their personalities and to see their giftings and to encourage them in that, because that wasn't something that was done, for me. But I think that, it says raise up a child in the way you should go and you will walk in it. So I think, I just want to love on them, and I want to encourage them in their gifts. They're all different. They're all unique. They're all special, and they're all funny. No.
They are funny. They say the greatest things sometimes.
Oh, they do. They do. They say the funniest things, and sometimes they say the sweetest things. So.
Yeah, they're such sweethearts for sure. It's fun.
They are a blessing.
Yes.
Like someone said something, I read it on a shirt, I think, something about, being a grandma is just a blessing.
Oh.
Of course, I'm not a grandma, I'm a Mimi, but it's still a grandma.
Exactly. You just need to change the shirt or get the other version of it.
Yeah. So I think it's a great blessing, and to pray for them and sow into them so they can be all they can be, all God wants them to be.
Yeah.
Not that I'm the soul. I have the soul thing on that, but I have me, and I can do what I can do.
Yes.
Everybody, like the one starfish, well, I threw that one in.
Exactly. Such a good story analogy for that. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to share, and kind of give us an overview and sharing so much of your story as well. So thank you for being a part of this. Definitely super grateful.
I hope it helps somebody. That's always my testimony. When, I'm really not one to talk about myself a lot, but I find that when I am ministering, I'll dredge up my testimonies, because it's like, if this is going to help you, I'll tell you.
Right.
Otherwise, I probably wouldn't tell you.
So true. So true.
Yeah, I'm going to sit here and tell you, oh, I'm having a hard time letting go of my stuff.
Right. It's encouraging to hear that from someone else, though, and know that you're not alone,
And I think it's encouraging. Our testimonies really do encourage one another.
They do.
That they're not alone. And sometimes that is exactly what you walk through, and to let somebody, like they said, to call back down to those below and say, you can do it.
Yes.
With our testimonies.
Well, this is definitely been that. Exactly. So we can all make it to the top.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I love you, and thank you for being such a blessing in my life.
I love you too. And you are definitely a blessing because I've always said that you were a gift for our family because you're an encourager.
Aww.
And it's like, we don't have a lot of encouragers in our family. So we really needed you.
Aw, thank you. It's so fun. Isn't she great, you guys? I am so thankful that she took the time to come on the show and to share her experience with Inner Healing Ministry. I hope that you got a lot of value and hope from that conversation. And I'm so excited to share again with you that we have audio of Darlene reading prayers for some of these different topics that we covered today. And you can find the links to those prayers on our website, creativeimpactpodcast.com, under episode 61. So you can go to creativeimpactpodcast.com/episode-61. You'll find sample prayers for forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving God, and forgiving others. You'll also find sample prayers for renouncing lies and inner vows, and a beautiful sample prayer for healing from trauma. Also on the website, you'll find links to the other resources that Darlene mentioned in the conversation. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to subscribe to the show so that you'll be notified whenever a new episode releases. You can subscribe right in whatever app you happen to be listening in. And while you're at it, it would be amazing if you'd be willing to leave a rating and a review. It takes just a few seconds, and it really does help other people to find the show. You can find the Creative Impact Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Just search Creative Impact Podcast. Throughout the rest of this year, we're going to be getting back into conversations with fellow artists who are sharing their stories with us. Thank you so much for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. If this show was helpful for you today, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend. Until next time, remember that you were designed to create, made to inspire, continue living with purpose and making an impact. See you next time, friends.